Welcome to the home of the conservative revolution. This is your weekly dose of common sense with Cory Bernardi.
Welcome back. This is your weekly dose of common sense. I'm Cory Bernardi, and we like to celebrate success. And in particular, we like to recognise the good works that people do as they've achieved their success. Now, one of the most successful Australians, he's sadly passed away, was a chap named Paul Ramsay. Now, Paul Ramsay started out as a land surveyor, but he later established a private psychiatric clinic in Sydney. And that morphed into the Ramsay healthcare empire. It grew over successive decades. It created hospitals in Australia, in the USA, the UK, and Hong Kong. And it was successfully floated on the stock exchange about 20 years ago, and it's now one of the largest private hospital operators anywhere in the world. It's got about 212 hospitals, employs more than 50,000 people, treats over 2 million patients every year. It made Mr. Ramsay a very, very wealthy man. He invested in television networks. Importantly, he was also a magnificently generous benefactor to a variety of educational, cultural, artistic, political and sporting organisations. He was quite rightly honoured with an Officer of the Order of Australia in 2002 for services to the community. And he passed away, but in his passing, he wasn't content to have his memory attributed to simply past deeds. He made one of the most extraordinary endowments, bequests, that his wealth, some $3 billion, was put into a philanthropic trust. The Ramsay Centre for Western Civilization is a beneficiary of that to the tune of some $30 million a year. And the mission of the Ramsay Centre is quite straightforward. It says to advance education by promoting studies and discussion associated with the establishment and development of Western civilization, including through establishing scholarship funds and educational courses in partnership with universities. They go on. They're going to collaborate with teachers and students at universities and high schools, as well as members of the wider community, in order to foster and promote an interest in and awareness of Western civilization. They say they're going to be creating Bachelor of Arts degrees in Western civilization in collaboration with 2 or 3 Australian universities, initially in New South Wales and the ACT, but also, if possible, further afield. They're going to support these degrees through a suite of undergraduate scholarships and the creation of new academic positions. It's going to endow a national Ramsay postgraduate scholarships open to recent Australian graduates from a range of disciplines. It's going to further study, it's going to further academia, and it's going to establish a program of summer schools, distinguished visiting lectures and other events designed to promote a wider appreciation of Western civilization. Who would have thought that was controversial? But apparently it is. Apparently it's too controversial for our leading university in the Australian National University, who rejected the call to have the Ramsay Centre established within their confines. Now, the approach by the university might be summed up when you have a look at the board of directors of the Ramsay Centre. It's chaired by that great Australian, John Howard, the former Prime Minister. It's also got on the board the Honourable Tony Abbott, another former Prime Minister. But there's also a conservative unionist there, Joe de Bruin, who has upheld Western civilizational values for his entire life. You've got a range of Ramsay healthcare professional board members. You've also got the member for Barowra, Julian Leeser. And you've got the principal of the Queenwood School, Elizabeth Stone, among others. Now, yeah, sure, it's top-heavy with, perhaps liberal-leaning or conservative-leaning people, but Western civilization is worth conserving. You have to understand your past in order to protect and defend your future. But our universities aren't interested in that. They're interested in having Confucius centres, sponsored by the Chinese government. They're interested in having Arab studies and Islamic centres, sponsored by Middle Eastern governments. but they will not have a centre for Western civilization supported by the legacy of a magnificent Australian. And Greg Sheridan, you know I'm a fan of his. Greg Sheridan wrote a great article in The Australian entitled "Big Unis Too Illiberal for the West, but Others Can Seize the Day." And I want to quote from it. He says, "The ANU experience should force the Ramsay Centre to completely re-evaluate its model." The ANU experience, by the way, is the rejection of the Ramsay Centre. This moment, and I go back to quoting, "This moment is a pivot point in our history, not just because it demonstrates what has happened to our universities. Confucius centres funded by the Chinese government abound. Our universities have taken money from Arab governments to sponsor Middle East studies, and the various peace study centres are comprehensively involved in advocacy, but a centre to study Western civilization is beyond the pale." We knew all that already, though the ANU case demonstrates once more how deeply illiberal our universities have become. But this is a pivotal point in another way. Paul Ramsay's philanthropic bequest of something in the order of $3 billion is special in Australian history. It offers an extremely rare and precious chance to do something positive for our culture, to make a difference. It could not have a wiser statesman as its chairman than John Howard, and until he was appointed Governor of Western Australia, Kim Beazley was also on the board. It is non-partisan and one of the most constructive initiatives in recent Australian history. There is a real chance now, however, that its endowment, its generosity and its goodwill could all be wasted. Any negotiation with a public university will take place in the shadow of the political campaign that destroyed the Ramsay initiative at the ANU. In negotiating with the universities, the Ramsay Centre could find itself in an analogous position to Barack Obama negotiating with Iran. A deal can be done, but only at the price of abandoning the core purpose of the deal in the first place. In talking about this initiative in recent months, I haven't met a single independent observer who thinks it can work as designed. Even if a course is sponsored with a title such as "The Development of Political Liberalism in Medieval Europe," it could well end up having an effective subtitle like "Critical Theory Insights into Demonising the Others in the Christo-Authoritarian Patriarchy of Racist Medieval Europe." He's on fire, Greg Sheridan. Now, John Howard is quoted in this article as saying he thinks it's too early to tell whether the Ramsay model of working through the big universities could actually work. But what we do know is this. The National Tertiary Education Union and the ANU Students Association objected on the basis that Tony Abbott, who's a Ramsay board member, as I mentioned, wrote a recent article in Quadrant saying that the degrees it sponsored would not just be about Western civilization, but in favour of Western civilization. How outrageous is that? A centre for Western civilization wants to promote the values that we cherish, that drive people to want to come to this country, that have delivered more prosperity around the world, and quite frankly, Western civilization is the building block of everything that we enjoy in this country. I think living in the West is preferable to living anywhere else. And it seems a pity that we're not allowed to advocate for it because the Tertiary Education Union and the ANU Students Association object too highly of it. You know, as a conservative, I'm appalled by our universities. I'm appalled that they shut down debate, that they are not interested in the flourishing of ideas and the robust to and fro of competing value systems and ideas. It is all one way. If you support Israel, you're demonised. If you want to stand up for the traditional views of the world, the social mores, you're demonised, you're heckled. If you want to go in there and argue in case of tradition, of values, of principles, of normality, you will be penalised through the university system. It is not working for us. It's becoming an indoctrination workshop rather than a battle of intellectual rigour. We can't accept that anymore. And I think the government needs to step up to the plate and say, well, if you're not going to produce things that are going to actually benefit Australia, we've got to reassess our entire funding model. Because right now, universities are massive businesses. I think they're helping to actually destroy the minds of our best and brightest rather than encourage them to be all they can be.